You're listening to the Spirit Podcast.
Good evening, seekers, watchers, wanderers in the half-light. This is Beyond the Veil, and I'm Beck, in your ear with the same torch lit, the same curiosity alight, the same respect for what whispers between worlds. You know the drill. We scan the fringe, we shine a light into the corners where the ordinary fails to hold, and together we listen for the patterns in the silence. It's you, it's me, and it's whatever is calling in the static. This month slides into the deep end now. The nights lengthen, the thresholds sag under their own weight, and the unusual doesn't just knock, it leans in. We'll be tracking anomalies in technology, cryptids waking from their hiding places, high strangeness hiding in plain sight, and yes, those stories that keep the hairs on the back of your neck alert. Now, if you feel a slight chill despite your heater humming, if your dreams shift without explanation, if your monitor flickers when no one is nearby, good. You're tuning into the right frequency. So grab your companion, a notebook, a candle, a quiet mind. Lean in close to the speaker, and let's begin. Tonight, we're going to wander where the world hasn't yet labeled the shape of the phenomenon, and we'll ask the question the culture rarely poses: when the veil thins, whose perspective gets to see? Stay with me. The news starts now. A new viral trend is bubbling up from TikTok's darker corners, and no, it's not a dance challenge or a makeup tutorial. It's a growing number of users claiming they've captured an extra man in their family photos. But here's the glitch. He only appears in printed versions, not the live digital preview, not in the screenshot, just in the physical prints. They call him the man in the frame. The sightings follow a pattern. Families gather for a sweet selfie, sometimes posed, sometimes casual. The digital copy looks fine, but when the photos are printed, either through online services or home printers, there's an unfamiliar figure lurking in the corner, always in the background, always just at the edge of visibility. Male presenting, pale, dressed like it's 1960, often partially obscured behind a bush, a coat rack, or a window. Never looking directly at the camera, but sometimes looking at you. Some report that the photos degrade over time, that when viewed weeks later, the man is closer, that his face becomes clearer, more detailed, until one day he's no longer in the photo at all. One woman in Maine swears that after tossing the printed photo into the trash, she began seeing him reflected in glass surfaces, her microwave door, her car window, her baby's playpen mirror. Not the kind of bonus portrait you want showing up between Halloween and Thanksgiving, is it? So what are we looking at here? Pareidolia? Viral marketing? A clever AI prank seeded by bored cryptographers? Sure, that's a normal angle, but I've seen this before, archetypally. The being who inserts itself into the family archive, the trickster who walks through memory rather than matter. The frame man may not be a man at all. He could be a placeholder, a watcher, an entity slipping into the representation of memory, but not memory itself. In spiritual lore, some shadow figures are said to linger not in your home, but in the imprint of an image, like a ghost haunting the echo of a bell. They bind to the emotional charge. They want to be preserved. If this trend continues, I'd be curious to see whether a frame man evolves or whether he starts being seen before the photo's taken. And hey, if you're listening out there, sir, maybe smile next time. Some call it pareidolia. Others think it's a coordinated prank, a new ARG or alternate reality game designed to mess with the collective psyche. But if that's true, it's working a little too well because what's surfacing isn't just fear, it's recognition. One user wrote, "I swear I saw him when I was a kid in a Polaroid my mom used to keep on the fridge. I thought it was my uncle, but it wasn't." Another said, "My daughter pointed to the frame and said,
'That's the man who watches me sleep.'"
We've heard of shadow people, of watchers, of the Hat Man. But this is something subtler, something curated. He's not appearing in the room. He's appearing in the record of the room. And that's what gets under your skin. Because if a spirit can insert itself into your memory's filing cabinet, into your photos, your heirlooms, your keepsakes, what else can it rewrite? There's a long-standing belief in some cultures that images steal part of the soul. But maybe it works the other way, too. Maybe certain beings lend a fragment of themselves to the image, waiting for someone to look, waiting for someone to print, waiting for a doorway. And if this frame man is a doorway, then he's already in your house. You might just want to double-check the next envelope that arrives from Shutterfly, or just stop printing altogether. Over in the Welsh countryside, in a town called Ruthin, there's a pub that's been raising more than just pints. It's raising eyebrows, and apparently the dead. The Star Inn, a charming 14th century watering hole, nestled among cobblestones and old bones, has just gone viral for capturing something truly bone-chilling. A horned face in a plume of smoke, grinning like it knows something you don't. Investigators from a ghost hunting crew were spending the night filming in the pub's ancient stone-walled bar. The place already had a reputation, reports of flying pans, self-writing chalkboards, and flickering lights that make the walls buzz like an old séance parlor. But that night, something different showed up. When one team member exhaled after a cigarette break, in the designated ghost smoking zone, of course, a strange shape formed in the smoke. A sharp-nosed, horned silhouette with eyes and a sinister grin. It lasted a few seconds, long enough for the others to gasp, snap a photo, and start nervously chuckling the way people do when they want to believe they're fine. But the kicker came the next morning when a message was discovered scrawled in white chalk on a board that hadn't been touched since the bar closed the night before. 4 words. I am horrible. Well, that's 3 words. Not the most elegant haunting in history, but points for honesty. Now, before we go full Rosemary's Baby on this, few observations. The pub's been standing since 1470. That's enough time to gather a decent cast of spectral regulars, and the message, it's unsettling, sure, but there's something sad in it, too. I am horrible. Not, I will kill you. Not, get out. Just a confession. A self-identification. Almost like something trapped finally spoke. We think of haunted places as echoes of violent deaths or vengeful spirits, but what if some of them are just holding rooms for those who can't forgive themselves? What if that horn-faced wasn't evil, but ashamed? The spiritual plane isn't black and white, and neither is the smoke. And let's be honest, every pub's got at least one regret-filled figure mumbling nonsense into the air. This one just left it on a chalkboard. Let's slide our key into the door of haunted tourism, shall we? Because the old ghosts aren't just tickling the backs of your chairs anymore. Now they're hosting you. Across the United States, historical hotels and inns, once grand foyers of travel, commerce, and human ambition, are being reappraised not just for their architecture, but for their spectral presence. According to a recent ranking of haunted places by state, California leads the pack with thousands of ghost sighting reports. On one hand, a tourism boom. On the other, a reminder that the price we pay for comfort often comes with unseen attachments. Take the list compiled by Historic Hotels of America. Their 2024 top 25 most haunted hotels include properties whose backstories are drenched in war, death, oppression, or simply decades of overlooked whispers. One standout, the Crescent Hotel and Spa in Arkansas, recently named the #1 best haunted hotel in the U.S. by readers of USA Today. Now, why this matters to us? Thresholds underfoot. Hotels are liminal spaces. People come, people leave, atmospheres shift at twilight. Old buildings are repositories of memory and trauma. When you sleep in such a place, you're literally lying in someone else's history. Spirits have new guests. The friendly Ghost in a luxury suite isn't just folklore now. It has marketing value, but marketing also means exposure, meaning more witnesses, meaning more anomalies captured on phones and shared on YouTube. Normalization of the uncanny. When haunted hotel staycations become part of travel itineraries, we shift from fear of the ghost to the ghost as an experience. And that changes the power dynamic. Instead of the ghost lurking at the edges, we invite the ghost in. Many of these properties have histories of suffering, wartime hospitals turned hotels, asylums rebranded, old inns built on sites of displacement. Spirits here aren't always looking to scare, but they are looking to be acknowledged. So here's a caution and a note to the curious. If you book a haunted stay this month, and arguably every night beyond, ask yourself not just, will I see a ghost? But what history am I sleeping over? Because sometimes the most potent haunting is the one you don't recognize, the one that uses the ambience of luxury as camouflage. It sounds like a line from a pulp novel midnight special, but the data is real. Monitoring platforms designed for tracking maritime traffic and unidentified objects have suddenly flagged thousands of underwater anomalies near U.S. shores, and yes, some observers are calling them ghosts under the waves. Here's what's surfaced. Since August of 2025, platforms registered more than 9,000 unidentified submersible objects, USOs, within 10 miles of U.S. coastlines. California and Florida lead the count. 389 sightings in California, 306 in Florida. These objects show transmedium capabilities. One moment underwater, the next airborne. They dart, they vanish, they reappear. Experts are split. Some proposed advanced secret tech. Others say we're witnessing phenomena that don't fit known categories. Not quite sea vessels, not quite aerial craft. Now, why does this matter? The sea has always been a liminal zone, the border between land and ocean, known and unknown. When anomalies operate in that boundary, they carry the signature of the uncanny world. The language of ghosts under the waves is evocative, but regardless of label, what matters is something is happening. Humanity is creating tools to see these things. We are capturing what we used to imagine. Just as you might catch a shadow in the mirror, we are now catching echoes beneath the surface. And that suggests two things. The unseen is becoming seen, and the tools of seeing are amplifying what was hidden. If spirits or non-human intelligences can engage in transmedium transit, water, air, then the traditional ghost in the room model may be too small. These anomalies might stretch the definition of haunting. For those listening from coastal areas, your environment includes more than just wind and waves. The sea may be whispering in a new dialect. So if you're ever walking the shore late at night, flashlight in hand, and the tide seems to breathe weird, don't dismiss it. Sometimes the current carries more than driftwood. "105 Bigfoot sightings in Idaho. Creature has excellent taste in real estate." We're moving away from the gadgets and shadows for a moment and into something primal. According to recent reports, the wildwood of Idaho is experiencing a surge of interest, not from real estate agents, but from something fur-covered and very large. In the past year, no fewer than 105 separate sightings of what resembles Bigfoot, or its Idaho-specific equivalent, have been logged in the state, according to KTVB.com. Now, what's happening? Most of the reported sightings cluster in the Boise region and the surrounding wilderness. One backpacker at Upper Dry Creek claimed a direct encounter in May. The reports note consistent traits: large bipedal shape, significant height, hair-covered body, strong musky odor, and a certain browse-friendly habitat selection: remote cabins, deep forest edges, secluded riversides. Local law enforcement say the number of calls has increased to the point where they're classifying them as unauthorized wilderness intrusions until proven otherwise. So my take and why you care. A surge in cryptid sightings rarely stands alone. Usually, there's a cultural pressure, media amplification, and sometimes a real shift in lull zones of nature being disturbed. The phrase, excellent taste in real estate, isn't a joke. These creatures showing up near human habitation aren't always the isolated wanderers of legend. They're looking at the edges of our space. From a spiritual vantage, when a boundary walker enters a human-adjacent zone, forest edge, cabin zone, wilderness airspace, the threshold between our world and their world flexes. Those spaces become liminal again. For you listening in, if you're heading into the woods this month, especially in Idaho or similar terrain, be aware. It's not just bears and bad Wi-Fi signals out there. Something else is watching the edge of your firelight. There you are, quietly checking in on the little one. The monitor is flatlined, the room dark, and then something moves. Not a toy, not a parent's silhouette, something else. Recent reports are mounting of Wi-Fi baby monitors picking up odd voices, fleeting figures, and ghost-like apparitions in children's rooms. One such case, a mother checking in saw and heard an unknown voice whispering through her monitor's speaker, even though no one was in the house. What's being reported? Strange voices or laughter when everything appears normal. Cameras capturing unidentified silhouettes just beyond the crib's edge or vanishing into the wall. Motion sensors triggering despite the room being empty. Parents reporting a deep sense of being watched or not alone. Now, children's rooms are supposed to be safe zones. When the boundary is crossed there, the unsettling factor multiplies. Technology opens gateways. A baby monitor connects rooms, networks, sometimes invisible threads we don't yet understand. From a metaphysical perspective, could some spirits prefer the monitor over the room? Not entering the space, but the viewfinder of the space. For you, if you're using tech that watches your little one, ask, who else might be watching the watcher? Now here's a note of caution. Don't rush to fear. It might be nothing more than digital glitch, interference, or imagination. But in the realm we track, nothing is often the easiest explanation to swallow when the real trouble whispers softly. There's something uniquely disarming about being watched through a screen, especially when you're the one who installed the screen. A digital guardian meant to protect, but now possibly playing host. In many spiritual traditions, children are considered more psychically porous, closer to the veil, more receptive to frequencies that adults filter out. The bedtime realm, the twilight of waking and sleep, is sacred terrain, vulnerable not just to dreams but to visitations. Now factor in that monitor. These devices are not analog anymore. They're often cloud-connected, Wi-Fi enabled, two-way audio capable, night vision enhanced, and equipped with AI motion detection. In short, we've created a techno-tether between sacred space and the grid. If spirits or non-human intelligences are looking for a clean signal, a baby monitor is as good a window as any. It makes me wonder, are these anomalies targeting the child or the parent watching from afar? Because many parents report something strange not just in the room but in themselves. Dizziness, emotional flashes, a sense that something is watching them back through the screen. Could it be these monitor hauntings aren't hauntings in the room at all, but something haunting the act of observation? Some watchers, after all, prefer mirrors to rooms. And in a world where every lens connects to something bigger, perhaps we've built 1,000 new eyes into our homes and left the lens cap off. So the next time you reach for the baby monitor, take a breath, ground yourself, protect the space, and don't just look into the screen. Notice who or what might already be looking back. If you thought your smart speaker was just listening for, "Hey Google," think again. More and more homeowners are reporting that their smart home systems, Wi-Fi lights, voice assistants, video doorbells, even smart thermostats are behaving as though someone else is in the room. And no, this isn't just a software update gone rogue. A family in suburban Ohio found their voice assistant randomly playing a 15-second audio clip of distant sobbing recorded by the device's microphone at 3 a.m., even though no one spoke. Another household reports that their smart lights dimmed to 13% brightness, turned to deep amber, and then brightened to full without any manual input, just before their doorbell camera registered a tall, dark figure standing at the curb, motion triggered but completely silent. In one case, a smart thermostat reset itself from a cozy 68 Fahrenheit down to 55 Fahrenheit and stayed there for 12 hours. The homeowner thought it malfunctioned until the device's internal log showed 2 voice-wake words at 2:17 a.m., but with no user present. Smart home devices are designed to make our lives easier. They're meant to disappear into the background, but when they act, we notice. And what's more telling than what they don't do is what they do when we're asleep or away. These devices are liminal in a new sense. They sit between physical space, your home, and network space, the cloud. If the unseen wants to visit, maybe it doesn't walk, it logs in. In spiritual traditions, thresholds aren't just doors or windows, they're signals. When the signal itself flickers, the boundary is active. Your smart home becomes a threshold device. A caution and a reflection. Lock your doors, yes, but also check your Wi-Fi networks. If something is flickering your lights, if your voice assistant speaks when no one asked it to, ask, who is listening or speaking? And if you hear a voice whispering through the speaker, don't assume it's just a bug. For some watchers, the easiest entry is not through the front door, it's through the control panel. The Shadow in the Stream, the trail cam cryptid surge in 2025. Deep in the silent woods, away from signal towers and social reminders, the wilderness is speaking. And this fall, it's doing so with trail cams, motion sensors, and footage that won't quit looking weird. A compilation released late October shows a spike in cryptid-style figures being caught on motion detection cameras, sometimes so clearly you pause the video, squint, rewind. The sort of footage where you see the shape but can't quite name the creature. What's being reported? Cameras in remote forests across the U.S., including mountainous, swamp, and dense wood zones, are logging bipedal dark figures, usually at dawn or dusk, sometimes stepping into frame, then frozen, then gone. In one brief clip, the figure pauses, appears to look directly into the lens, tilts its head, then turns and disappears into the brush. The timing is consistent with twilight thresholds, that in-between moment when both diurnal and nocturnal territories overlap. Some researchers suspect that these are misidentified animals, clever hoaxes, or sensor glitches. But as you and I both know, when the pattern emerges and keeps showing itself, we move into the realm of pattern warning rather than anomaly isolation. Cryptids are often treated as folklore or fringe fun, but this uptick suggests that they might be mobilizing or at least activating now, when thresholds are ripe. Trail cams are passive watchers in our environment. When the unseen becomes visible to the watcher, the balance shifts. The hunter becomes the observed. The wilderness isn't just a quiet zone anymore. It's a frontier, not only of nature, but of something else, something liminal. Seems to be the theme of the news tonight. And for those of you tuning in from rural edges or night drive roads, the wild you think you avoid might be watching you back. If you've got a trail cam or a night vision setup, check it. Not just for deer, not just for raccoons, but for shapes that pause, shapes that look, and ask the question, what's watching the watchers? Because when the watchers get watched, the veil shifts. At the top of the page, let's lean into a story that blends hard science with a whisper of the unseen. Recent satellite data reveals that the region known as the South Atlantic Anomaly, or SAA, a massive weak spot in Earth's magnetic field, has grown dramatically, almost half the size of Europe, and is shifting towards Africa. What's been discovered? Well, since at least 2014, the anomaly has been steadily growing, but new data shows an acceleration in both size and strength of weakening fields. Satellites flying through the anomaly region encounter higher levels of radiation and instrument malfunctions. It's a known hazardous zone in space weather speak. The anomaly is not static. It's migrating and reshaping. patches of reverse magnetic flux are contributing to the drift east toward Africa. This isn't simply a technical problem for satellite engineers. It impacts our spiritual map of thresholds. And here's how. Magnetic fields are part of the invisible architecture of the planet. They guard surfaces, influence atmospheres, even affect biological rhythms. When one part of the architecture weakens, the boundary between normalcy and anomaly flexes. For those who watch the veil, not just with spiritual eyes, but meter eyes, this is a signal. A weakened field could mean more permeability, not in a new age hype sense, but in an environmental sense. Less shielding, more seepage. Imagine this. A child's monitor flickers, a smart home device misbehaves, or a trail cam records something odd. Could one underlying thread be that the shield has loosened? That the unseen finds easier entry when the planet's invisible armor is thinning? There are 3 noteworthy speculations from the edge. More than satellites glitching, most public discussions center on equipment failure. But from the fringe view, this could correlate with increased high strangeness events, weird lights, uncanny ambient interference, spontaneous techno-hauntings. Thresholds where you least expect them. The SAA is over the ocean and remote continents, yet the effect of a weakening boundary need not stay local. Once a threshold flexes in one place, echoes can appear elsewhere. Homes, forests, monitors that feel unrelated but share the same structural weakness. If the Earth shield weakens, what internal shields of our own weaken in tandem? Emotional, spiritual, energetic? The outer anomaly becomes a metaphor and a condition. Take a mental note. If you live under or near geomagnetic soft spots, like southern South America, southern Africa, or remote ocean-adjacent zones, your personal field might be more active than usual. Monitor your gadgets, especially if they're connected, smart, networked. If sensors glitch, lights flicker, devices behave oddly, don't just think bug. Also think border glitch. Ground yourself. This is not fear fuel. It's awareness. A thinning shield doesn't guarantee intrusion, but it increases potential. Burning incense, salt, or ritual isn't mandatory, but steady presence and rootedness are. So as we mark this headline in our ledger, let's note, the Earth's magnetic veil is not inert. It breathes, weakens, pulls back, and behind it, the watchers linger, the thresholds press, and we find ourselves on the edge of things we once believed fixed. The lights blink. Your appliance hums with a faint warp. The street outside goes quiet. Then, a surge. Unoiled, unexpected, unexplained. Across multiple states. Late October into early November 2025, utility companies reported a series of anomalous grid surges and strange network disturbances. Not just power outages. Glitches in the hum of civilization's infrastructure. What the reports say. In the Pacific Northwest, a neighborhood experienced a 20-second blackout at 3:17 a.m., just before 942 smart meters rebooted themselves. In Florida, a surge hit a coastal substation, causing all rooftop solar in the block to invert for 7 minutes, just as offshore radar detected a loud whoop sound under the water. A Midwest data center reported 6 cooling fans shutting off simultaneously without triggering alarms. Technicians chalked it up to a mystery voltage drop and restored service with no physical damage. One local farmer in Ohio captured it on his smartphone, his barn lights cycling 0 to 100 brightness 3 times in the span of 2 minutes, then returning to normal. Why we ought to care. Infrastructure is meant to be invisible. When it becomes visible, via failure, blinking, rebooting, it means the boundary between daily, normal, and anomaly is being touched. The unexpected surges suggest not just technological vulnerability, but a threshold being crossed, a signal intrusion rather than just a blackout. For those who monitor the unseen, these grid events look suspiciously like an echo of something larger, a message, a moment of access, an open door. The question isn't just, what caused it? But, What else was let in when the system flickered? A few angles worth noting. Time of occurrence. Many incidents cluster in the early morning hours when human sentience is low. Protective vigilance dip. Location patterns, not just rural or urban, but transitional zones, suburbs bordering farmland, coastal infrastructure near open water, that edge space where two domains meet. Technology as portal. Smart meters, solar arrays, network cooling systems, they all interface with the grid and the cloud. When their regulation fails, they act as a gateway rather than just a victim. If your lights flicker this week, it might just not be the utilities company's fault alone. Sit with it, log it, ask, has there been any weird dreams the night before? A heavy feeling in your room? A sense of being observed without reason? Because sometimes the flicker is not a bug, it's a signal. Now, we've covered this in the past, but it has been talked about nonstop lately. So we are coming full circle back to the anomaly that straddles both the cosmic and the human threshold, the object known as 3I Atlas. It's been in the news before, but now it's back in circulation with fresh signals, fresh data, and fresh questions. And yes, we'll apply my truth and fire lens in just a moment. What we know so far. 3I Atlas entered the solar system in 2025 following a hyperbolic trajectory that marks it as an object from beyond our own star system. Recent analysis detect unusual chemical signatures, including nickel vapor and compounds rarely seen in natural comets. Observations note anomalous acceleration, unexpected orbit deviations, and patterns that some argue coordinate with frequencies used by SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence research. Some voices in the scientific and metaphysical fringe propose that 3I Atlas might not just be a natural visitor, but rather an engineered probe or something even more deliberate. Now, why this should matter? This isn't just space stuff. When something from outside our system grazes ours, it echoes our field of thresholds. The visitor becomes a ripple in both outward space and inward soul space. Are you seeing the theme here? The thresholds, the liminals, the 3I Atlas passing over. From a spiritual perspective, any craft or being crossing cosmic thresholds triggers resonance in our own threshold zones, tech, psyche, environment. If our outer boundaries are shifting, see previous headlines, smart home intrusions, monitor hauntings, grid surges, then the presence of an interstellar entity haunts us. In prophetic and metaphoric terms, to call 3I Atlas a probe is to admit that someone or something is looking in, and when watchers are watched, the watch become aware, and that flips the power. If 3I Atlas is engineered, what is it looking for? And are we the curious subject or the unintended target? What if the anomalous chemistry, nickel vapor, unnatural composition, is a sign of passage through other thresholds, dimensions, fields, membranes, not just space? If our technologies are failing, monitors, homes, grids, could those failures align temporally with this cosmic visitor's passage? In other words, could the visitor's signal coincide with our threshold weakening? And finally, if this is real, how do we respond? Not just with disbelief, but with vigilance, ritual, grounding, community, because the spectacle will pass. What remains is the change in us. What you, my audience, can hold. Stay curious but discerning. Not every anomaly means alien overlord, but every anomaly means threshold in motion. Map what you feel and observe in the next few weeks. Grid flickers, weird dreams, digital oddities, body sensations. See if any of these things correlate with the space updates about 3I Atlas. Keep your circle of truth, your protective practices, your grounded rituals, your community conversations ready, because when the outer moves, the inner must respond. Which brings us into November sky and threshold markers. This isn't just your ordinary look up, see stars segment. For watchers like us, months like November aren't just about celestial displays. They're about thresholds activating, liminal zones opening, and the sky doing what it does best.
Whispering.
Let's talk about what's showing up. The famed Leonid meteor shower is active November 3rd to December 2nd of 2025 and expected to peak around the morning of November 17th to the 18th. Under dark skies, good news, minimal moonlight interference, you might see up to 15 meteors per hour. The northern Taurid meteor shower is active from around October 20th to December 10th, with its peak predicted November 11th through the 12th. Late in the month, planetary events, cluster alignments, and weaker meteor streams provide extra context for watchers attuned to deeper signals. Meteor showers are often framed as pretty sky shows, but for us, they indicate debris crossing or intersecting zones, Earth passing through cosmic trails left behind by comets, asteroids, or possibly other phenomena. Every fragment is a marker. When Earth crosses a meteoroid stream, the boundary between space and atmosphere becomes more permeable, less static, more conscious. If the outer is shifting, the inner field, emotions, tech, dream space, they tend to reflect. With the magnetic anomaly we discussed earlier, weak spots in the Earth's magnetic field, and the smart home spiritual tech disturbances, the skies and the ground are echoing the same script. Boundaries loosen, watchers watch, we sense the change. The leaner moon on the night of the Leonids give us ideal dark conditions, not just for seeing meteors, but for feeling the quiet. And on the nights around November 17th to 18th, stay alert. The sky may rip a notch, and what disappears into Earth may leave us changed. A few considerations and invitations. If you're in a low light zone, rural, forest edge coast, and can set aside time between midnight and dawn around mid-November, lie back with your notebook. Watch not just for streaks, but for how the air feels. The stillness shifts. The imaginary boundary blurs. Don't assume such events are separate from what's happening inside the house. Monitor the glitches, odd ambient feelings, trail cam captures. They may correlate with when the skies are active. Use this as a month of intentional vigilance, outside, inside, subtle. Pay attention to less obvious signals. The meteor shower is the loud event, but the hush afterwards, that may carry the message. Reflect on this. If we're moving into a season where the veil is thinner, and I know we are, then the sky overhead becomes a mirror for what's underfoot. The cosmic debris, the magnetic drift, the technological glitches, they all tell the same narrative. So as you prepare your gaze upward this month, remember, you're not just watching meteors. You're witnessing markers, not just seeing light arcs, but feeling doors open, the watchers shifting. Stay sharp, the sky's speaking, and I'm listening with you. Now, this caught my attention because it's subtle, eerie, and not obviously supernatural, which means it could be a fine example of the threshold we're monitoring. In northern Minnesota and parts of Canada's boreal region, bird watchers and locals have recorded an unusual drop in certain migratory species along the lake shore strips this October through November window. What's unfolding? Several bird watching groups report that waterfowl that traditionally arrive in late October were either weeks late this year or didn't show up at all in specific lake zones. Locals near Lake Superior noted the hush. The geese didn't honk their formation across the north wind. The ducks didn't chatter in the reeds. One resident said, "We walked the shore expecting noise. We heard nothing." Environmental scientists attribute some of this change to shifting weather patterns, colder early nights, and disrupted food chains. But many watchers wonder, could something else be influencing the silent shoreline? Birds, especially migratory water birds, are ecological canaries. Their routes and behaviors are finely tuned to threshold cues, daylight hours, magnetic fields, seasonal shifts. When they deviate, it's often a marker for a broader field change. The lake's edge is another liminal zone. Land meets water, stillness meets movement, the horizon opens. When that zone is out of sync, other unseen zones might be too. If our previous headline suggests thinning boundaries, again, monitors glitching, smart homes being interrupted, cosmic objects breaching space, then this is the biological echo. The animals that know their old rhythm say something changed. So if you live near remote lakes, borders of woods and waters, keep a note of the silence. Not just what you see, but what you don't. A quiet shore can carry as much information as a shouting sky. The migration routes of birds are higher dimensional than just flying north. They follow geophysics, magnetics, memory, instinct. Any disruption in those layers might signal deeper disturbances. Consider your own migratory patterns this month. Track those dreams, that intuition, the creative shifts. If you feel off schedule, if you sense your internal flight path delayed or diverted, you're aligned with these patterns. Hidden in the quiet corners of our modern world, a much less reported but deeply meaningful anomaly is unfolding. The accelerating loss of indigenous languages, and with them, the subtle collapse of liminal cultural spaces. Recently, several language preservation organizations have sounded the alarm that by the end of the decade, hundreds more languages may disappear, taking with them unique cosmologies, mythologies, thresholds of perception, and ways of seeing the unseen. The latest data through UNESCO, or UNESCO, indicate that more than 40% of the world's estimated 7,000 languages are endangered, with a growing number considered critically endangered, meaning fewer than 10 elderly speakers remain. In parts of Canada's Arctic region and in remote Australian Aboriginal communities, certain dialects once used for spirit world communication, song lines, and ritual are ceasing to be passed to younger generations. A preservation effort in Central America reports that a tree ring style memory book used by a small Mayan clan to record seasonal and supernatural events is now unread by the younger generation. The language itself lacks translation into the mainstream tongue which dominates schooling. The effect is not only sociological. Many watchers of the strange note that when a language dies, the grammar of the frontier, the vocabulary for liminality, threshold states, vision modes, they die too. We lose not just words, but the doors words open. And why this folder of news touches upon our spiritual metaphysical radar, because language isn't just a communication tool. It shapes the map of reality, what we can name, what we can see. When a community's language fades, the unseen parts of the world become harder to articulate, easier to overlook, even vanish from collective awareness. Communities on the threshold between worlds, between seasons, between seen and unseen, often rely on ritual, tale, and symbol. These are embedded in language. If the language disappears, so does the cultural threshold map. From a prophetic standpoint, when a system collapses internally, language, culture, tradition, the external systems, technology, infrastructure, belief frameworks, tend to fill that void. And sometimes what moves in isn't benign. Consider your own threshold languages. Not only exotic tongues, but the vocabulary you use for the unseen. Portal, signal, guardian, watcher, veiling. Are they still alive in your speech? Are you passing them on? What words do you use to describe your own threshold experiences? Is it in common language or is it fading? Recognize the symbiosis. Just as we track the monitors and the sensors and the alter states, we must also track meaning shifts. Because an unseen world becomes unseen not only when we lose it, but when we lose the words to talk about it. And now it's time for a strange tale from history's shadow, the ghost who solved its own murder. Let me take you back to 1897, Greenbrier County, West Virginia. A winter thick with silence, the kind of silence where voices echo long after they're gone. Her name was Zona Heaster Shue, a young woman found dead in her home, laid out on the bed, hands folded neatly over her chest. Her husband, Erasmus, claimed she'd passed suddenly of everlasting faint. A poetic lie, if there ever was one. Doctors swayed by his grief agreed. No autopsy, just a funeral, just a widow. But Zona's mother, Mary Jane Heaster, wasn't having it. She always distrusted Erasmus. She knew his stories had way too many holes, and her daughter's body too many secrets. So she did what any good mother in Appalachia might do when justice fails the living. She asked the dead, and the dead answered. Over 4 nights, Zona came to her mother in dreams, not as mist, not as feeling, but clear, vivid, articulate. She told her mother that her husband had strangled her in a rage, that he crushed her windpipe, that he had twisted her neck so violently it broke between the first and second vertebrae. When Mary Jane awoke from the final dream, she marched straight to the prosecutor. And somehow, miraculously, they listened. Zona's body was exhumed, an autopsy was performed, and exactly as the spirit said, her neck had been broken. Erasmus was arrested, tried and convicted of murder, sentenced to life. And to this day, Zona's case remains the only known instance in U.S. legal history where a ghost's testimony helped secure conviction. Think about that. A courtroom guided by the dead. A mother who believed, a daughter who refused to stay silent. In this tale, it's not the haunting that chills me, it's the truth-telling. Because sometimes the veil thins, not for terror, but for justice. And now it's time for a listener lore. This was submitted by Watcher Hill 86, subject the uninvited passenger. Hey Beck, first time writing in, but I've listened for years. What happened to me isn't dramatic. No full-bodied apparition or levitating furniture, but it still doesn't sit right, and maybe it'll resonate with someone else tuning in. About 2 weeks ago, I was driving home from work around 11:30 p.m. I take the same stretch of rural road every night. There's a spot about a mile from my house where the trees on both sides lean in and the road dips low. Locals call it the cut. I've always felt weird driving through it, like my headlights don't shine quite as far there, or like the air's thicker, but that night something extra was off. My dog, Scout, was in the back seat like usual, and he stood up just before we entered the cut. Ears alert, growling under his breath, not barking, growling. Then the interior lights flickered, not fully on, just a flash, like something passed between the overhead bulb and the seat. I figured it was a short. We made it through. Scout settled down. I told myself I was just tired. But the next morning, when I got in the car to go to work, I glanced in the rear view mirror and saw it. A single dusty handprint on the rear passenger window. Too high for Scout, too outside to be for me, and definitely not there the night before. I keep my car spotless. I wiped it off. I drove to work. Nothing else happened. But the next night, same stretch of road, same time, the cabin got cold again. My breath fogged, and this time I felt it. Like someone was sitting behind me, not touching, just watching. No more handprint, just the feeling. Now I drive a longer route home. I add 15 minutes. It's worth it. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was a warning, but I am not inviting it back in to check. That's from Watcher Hill 86. Creepy. Now let's talk about some upcoming events at Veil Markers. The 1111 portal on the date of November 11th, 2025. That acts as a potent energetic gateway. It's not just Veterans Day or numeric quirk. Spiritual sources call it the 1111 portal, a moment of heightened intuitive clarity and threshold activation. In a month already thick with anomalies, 1111 becomes a marker. Watch for shifts in dream space, digital glitches, and odd synchronicities around this date. Note any messages, visions, and interpretations that happen on or around 1111, and treat it like a signal flare. Our favorite, Mercury retrograde, planetary shifts from early November into the month. Transit events include a retrograde of Mercury in Sagittarius and Scorpio and other planetary re-entries. Retrogrades are not just delays, but zones of rewiring technology, communication, and thresholds. God, don't I know. Given our earlier headlines about tech oddities and threshold failures, this retrograde adds a substrate of cosmic glitch energy. Monitor for those tech hiccups, especially between November 9th and the 29th. November 17th through the 30th is the waning lingering edge as the moon wanes from full towards new and then begins waxing again. The period between roughly November 17th and 30th becomes a quiet edge. The ambient field is less lit, shadows lengthen, and watchers often experience echo effects. Many of the strange headlines that I covered tonight, well, this aligns with this kind of edge time. In late November, maybe we should do a gratitude transition ritual, because as November moves towards its close, the traditional cultural markers, Thanksgiving in the U.S., harvest rituals, year-end wrap-ups, can raise spiritual volume without us noticing. And this hidden bustle beneath the festival cheer can open up new thresholds. When collective attention turns inward, gratitude, pause, transition, the field shifts. It's fertile for watcher work. So maybe at dusk one late November evening, we should light a candle and reflect on one thing lost. Maybe a system, a belief, a relationship, and one thing reclaimed. Threshold, insight, connection. We'll use it as a signal reset. Sounds good to me. And just like that, we emerge on the other side of the signal. We've wandered through ghost-riddled grids, watched cryptids press against the edge of the lens, and tracked watchers not only behind the monitor, but sometimes inside it. We followed flickers, hums, shadows, and stories, and listened closely to the spaces between. This is the work, after all, not just to report the strange, but to honor it, to witness what doesn't fit, to speak what isn't trending, to hold a lantern at the edge and say, yeah, I see it too. If you've felt the static lately and the veil has been brushing your skin when no one's around, you're not imagining it, you're in tune. And if you made it this far in the episode, you're part of something more than just a show. You're part of the watch circle, the hidden listeners, the silent signal keepers, the ones who don't turn away just because the light shifts strange. As always, my deepest thanks to you for riding this current with me, for holding space in a world that doesn't always reward deep seeing, and for trusting the voice behind this mic. The veil may be thin, but we remain. Till next time, keep your candles lit, your dreams recorded, and your watchers noticed. I'm Beck, and this has been Beyond the Veil. Stay curious, stay grounded, and stay just strange enough to notice what the world forgets to name.
To the spirit
Podcast.
supernatural science
Aliens. I'm ghost.
psychic mystic
Spirit.
divine source heaven
The dead. It's magic.